It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mainz and Dutts. I'm your host, Mainz, and my colleague, trying to find out what size England shirt he should get for the new season, Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Hello, sir. I am immensely pleased that they've gone back to a cable knit jumper, but the rest of the kits are absolutely awful.
I've seen the kit, and that one that like Morgan's wearing, so I assume it's the T20/1 day number, is outrageous. It's like we've gone back to 1992 World Cup standards. Huh?
Yeah, I mean it looks like a QPR kit that someone's left a purple sock in with. Yeah,
it's not good. Like it's not good. It's not good. Big week this week. We've through the draft and we survived. So this is our draft takeaway show, not takeaways as in, curry and rice. But we've also got
Don't get rice.
Don't get rice, no. Just fills you
empty
up.
Carbs.
Empty carbs, indeed. We've got the Brilliant Charles Dagnall on later. Neil got to speak to him, I didn't, due to a multitude of technical issues that I won't even begin to bore people with. So later on in the show, Neil and Charles will hammer through what can only be described as a stream of consciousness about the draft. How it went. We know Daggers, he's absolute gold and almost impossible to stop talking. The issue when you get someone whose job is radio and in theory to fill noise on TMS to go and get a word in edgeways is difficult. So me not being on it is probably irrelevant, as you wouldn't have been able to hear me anyway. No,
we slagged you off anyway.
Yeah, well, I would expect nothing less. So let's get on with the draft. Obviously, we did a mock draft, and ironically enough, you're the expert. Obviously, writer on multitude of websites, Rotoviz, NFL Girl UK, hundreds of them. Right, you wrote a million different tight end articles. In terms of your mock draft, you got three right. Now I know that you're going to say that you got more right based on positions, but I'm saying actual real players. You got Myles Garrett. Ooh, that was difficult. Solomon Thomas. Well, you're cleverer than Ryan Pace, obviously, who didn't believe that the 49ers were going to take him, and Leonard Fournette from the Jacksonville Jaguars.
So 3 out of the top 4 I got right, and then for the next 28, I took a dirt nap.
You did absolutely take a dirt nap, Dutton. So if we go to me, I got Garrett, Thomas and Fournette. I think, to be honest, most people got that. If you didn't, what are you doing?
Don't be a hero.
Exactly. I also had Christian McCaffrey going to the Panthers. Go me. And go that offense for next year. I had David Njoku, the tight end, going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in some kind of that offense is going to be scary style. I had Garrett Bowles going to the Broncos. Didn't have his son going, but there you go. That's just one of those things. And I also had Taco Charlton going to the Dallas Cowboys. Know your enemy, Dutton, is the best way to describe my pick of Taco Charlton. Know your enemy.
You just love tacos?
I love tacos. My dad's a Man U fan, so he loves Charltons. Combine them together. I hate Dallas. Got it. Nailed.
Yeah.
I guess if we look at it, kind of happened that I was right, because what we didn't get, neither of us, and I don't think anyone did, was all the quarterbacks going so early. I mean, the quarterbacks are gone by like 12.
It benefits an awful lot of teams, because I think an awful lot of teams in the first round, you can be quite pleased with what they came away with, and basically that happened because an awful lot of teams moved up to get quarterbacks, so that meant the drop down that the Eagles benefited from, the Redskins certainly benefited from. I think there's, aside from the obvious one, I don't think there's an awful lot of teams in that first round who really you could look at and say, what the f*** were you doing?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I suppose if what benefited our teams, if we talk about that, is we were, middle of the rounds, I guess is probably the best way to describe where our teams were picking. But because of where they were, because of how there was a massive run on offensive skill players early doors, which I don't think anyone really expected. It's a defence-heavy draft, so no, and then everyone's gone up high to get those offensive players. We just, yourselves and ourselves, just sat back and let those top quality defensive players come to us. And if we start with you, Dutton, talk me through your pleasure in getting Derek Barnett.
Oh, I was made up. I mean, at that stage, it was pretty obvious we were going to get a good defensive player, but to get Barnett, I was absolutely made up. I mean, obviously, I've spoken in the past that he did break Reggie White's sack record with the Tennessee Volunteers. I was petrified that the Cowboys were going to take him. So to get him in, I think he is going to make an impact from day one, based on what he's done at college and what Jim Schwartz can do with him. So I was so happy with that pick.
I mean, if you go to me, like, if you want to understand my thought process on the Washington semi-professional football team getting Jonathan Allen, look at the mock draft where I had him going 3, and I believe I said, and he will be seen as the best player in the draft. Concerns around his shoulder, medicals or medicals, aren't they? And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But, to be able to get a player at 17 of Jonathan Allen's undoubted talent is frightening for Carson Wentz, Eli Manning, and Dak Prescott.
Absolutely.
So I guess, what did you have any thoughts on any of your other picks that you think, I quite like that one?
Well, Sidney Jones is a top 10 talent, but because of his injury, fell to the second round. Had to be pleased with that. I wrote about Donnell Pumphrey a few weeks ago. Basically, you look at his production in college is absolutely phenomenal. He broke Marshall Faulk's record rushing for San Diego State. He's the leading rusher in FBS history. He's 5'7" or 176 pounds. That's an issue. If he can add a bit of bulk, the player I comped him to in my article, I said I'd love to see him go to the Eagles and learn from Darren Sproles. He went to the Eagles. He will learn from Darren Sproles. Shelton Gibson could be Deshaun Jackson light. He averaged something, I think it was like 20 yards per reception in college. He also averaged 25 yards per kick return. So straight away there's the Eagles again trying to improve special teams. And also the other wide receiver, Mac Hollins, who had 81 receptions in college and 20 of them were touchdowns. So that's splash play. It's what the Eagles didn't have last year. They can, you don't have to have long drives that ultimately go nowhere. They now have options that they can hit deep quickly. So Howie Roseman's a wizard, as we've said. So I was very pleased with the other players.
Although according to some of our Twitter followers, not as high a wizard as some of the others that we named. We called him a top wizard, and we were summarily knocked back into our box. In terms of Washington, like, you get 2 players from Alabama who have the best defense. There is concerns, obviously, that that hasn't necessarily translated in the NFL. You hope that changes. Concerns about Anderson. Is he an elephant hand? He was a fantastic player for Bama, as was Allen. We got Fabian Moreau, the cornerback. It's a great. It's one of them. He tore his pec on pro day. Same kind of concept as Sidney Jones. Really, is he going to be fit? Don't really know, but he's talented, and you hope that when he's fit, he's going to start. We got in the 4th round. He went with Samaje Perine. He was the other guy who isn't Joe Mixon in the Oklahoma backfield. Very talented, more of a bowling ball. I think they look at it and they think we couldn't get in. We couldn't, much like you said, we couldn't get in the end zone last year. We struggled, 4th and short. I think that's why they got Perine in. I do. Him and Rob Kelly, that is a large backfield, but I think that's why they've got them in to try and sniff those things out. The other guys, I'm not going to lie, I don't really know much about them. I'm not going to attempt to. And I know you didn't like the Sprinkle pick because you looked at him for RotoViz when you did all the tight end stuff. Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. And at that job, I look at it, you multitude of picks, and your job is to get 3 or 4 that are consistent starters for you. And if you can get one in a Pro Bowl, or and when I say Pro Bowl, anyone can do that, but in a Pro Bowl level, then you do that. And I think in the ability to get Allen, they've got that type of guy, and he's actually from the area, so the hope is that good things happen going forward with Jonathan Allen. And put it this way, the defence can't get any worse. So,
no.
That's where you got to think about it.
Playerprofiler.com with your sixth round pick, Robert Davis, who's a wide receiver out with Georgia State.
Yeah.
His closest pro comparison, better man, he's a sixth round pick, according to all his measurables and whatnot, is Dante Moncrief.
Yeah, not bad. He's 6'3", 219 from Georgia State.
He's got a ridiculously good catch radius. His speed and burst are in the very highest of all charted, and the comps of his market share in college and his some of his other skills, they're not great. But when you throw it all together, like they do a player profiler, Dante Moncrief, if you can get a Dante Moncrief in the sixth round, that's not too shabby.
I think this is where you need, when you get to that level, I know Washington haven't been consistently good, but in theory, now, based on the fact 2 decent seasons, they must have a decent roster. So because you've got a decent roster, it allows you to pick players who you're taking a swing at, so to speak. You're not looking to get starters in those lower rounds. You're looking to try and get depth, and hopefully find a gem. That's what you're looking to do, and that's how you've got to try and do the draft, I guess. And it's where that they can do that, and some other teams who've sucked can't. They're trying to find 7 starters. That's almost impossible to do.
Absolutely.
So, Dalton, I guess from my point of view, that's we talked about ours. We showed our lack of knowledge on the mock draft. We're basically Mel Kiper Jr., Todd McShay, and Mike Mayock rolled into one in terms of mock drafts. So let's get on with chatting to the brilliant Charles Dagnall and get his thoughts on the draft.
Long-time friend of the pod, Charles Dagnall, is back with us again. Daggers, thank you very much for joining me.
Absolute pleasure, Dutts. Great to be on.
Well, unfortunately, as I say, it's just me and thee speaking, as Mainzy's having a technical issue with his ball bearings. But we'll try not to let that stop us.
Well, you know what? In fact, look, I am not one to speak ill of somebody who is not present during the pod, but he's probably a better job. He's just going to go on about the Redskins. This is their year. Kirk Cousins this, and we've had a great draft that, and it just gets a bit dreary after a while, to be perfectly honest. So let's just keep it with an Eagles-Bucks theme, and hopefully we can stay positive throughout the entire thing, apart from Mainzy drags us down.
Well, yeah, we'll go with that. I mean, ultimately, I think you do have to take your hats off to the Redskins for holding a draft without a GM. But we'll save that for another time.
You talk about weird franchises, and we can talk about Buffalo and them getting rid of their GM like an hour after the draft has taken place. I thought Buffalo had a decent draft, to be perfectly honest, but it transpires, and you may know more about this than I, but it transpires that the head coach had more to do with the draft than the GM did. But Washington, they basically used the draft board that was originally in place. So the poor bloke's lost his job, but it's almost like when you do a maths sum and it's sort of like, show us your working, and he showed their working and they've gone, great, thanks very much, see you later, and we're going to use all of his working to actually formulate our draft. Anyway, that's enough of the Redskins. I'm tired of them already, and the season's not even started.
Absolutely. I mean, from watching the draft, we'll go to the wider view. For the first time, I think that I've watched it, the good city of Philadelphia, I may be slightly biased, made it look like an event that people would want to go to. It just seemed to be such a well-organised thing to do.
Absolutely right. Couldn't agree with you more. And I love how they're taking it around. You remember when England football, actually, when Wembley was being rebuilt, and England football went and played at all of the stadiums. So they went to Villa Park and Old Trafford, and then up to the North East and St James's Park and the East Midlands. They travelled all around, and it had such a brilliant response. And then when sort of Wembley was built, everyone sort of goes, it really got to the sort of the roots of the game. And I think the fact that they've had it in Chicago, obviously they've had it in New York for so long, and then going to Chicago for a couple of years, they've taken it to Philly, and Philly came out. That's where you want to see it. Makes for great television pictures, of course. Huge noise, great festival type of atmosphere, 100,000 on each of the days, great guests as well. Sons of Philadelphia. And I just really think that they put on a really good show. And that's what it is now. You know, the draft, after it being, you know, three blokes with a chalkboard a blackboard and chalk, to now the event that it is, a 3-day TV marathon, really, which they've stretched out. But goodness me, I tell you what, 10 minutes in, and it was the soap opera. It was the soap opera they were all hoping for. Something changed, and I'm sure we'll talk about Chicago. But it then made for gripping, compulsive viewing. And I think just the atmosphere, the event, and the amount of people who were there to witness it and react live to what was going on. I think the NFL Network will be absolutely delighted with, I thought, a very, very good panel. I've got to say this about the NFL Network, and I don't know whether you agree or disagree, but what I did enjoy was the actual main panel. Now, I think it's David Shaw from Stanford, the college coach.
Yeah.
He was on the panel. Daniel Jeremiah moved the sticks, and also Mike Mayock. They actually had 3 draft analysts, as opposed to maybe a couple of former players who don't know and haven't watched enough of the college game to be really up on what's been going on. I really loved the analysis. I loved their in-depth theories. You know, you love the Mike Mayock drinking game and the fact that he I didn't see him going here. They're drafted for need. He's a high energy, high motor guy, and all of his catchphrases that he used. But he's very, very good. And I just thought the NFL Network, along with Philadelphia, I thought the whole production was gripping for 3 days.
There was the odd spell where they'd go back to the studio, as it were, in LA, and they'd have Dan Hellie, who's very good, but then they have, no disrespect to him, but I will disrespect him. I'd rather listen to my daughter's opinions on the NFL than Heath Evans. He doesn't. I'm not actually sure he knows what he's talking about, because his gem from this draft is, if Coney Ealy had been in this draft, he would have been the first overall pick.
Oh, do me a favour.
Yeah.
Do me an absolute favour. Look, and what did he say about something? Didn't he say someone was poor? A team was poor because they didn't have a recognised fullback. Yeah, that's what it is. That is absolutely the crux to all Super Bowl winning teams, is to have a decent and healthy fullback. Do me a favour. And that's why I liked the NFL Network. Yes, of course, we got reaction from people like Steve Mariucci, from Steve Smith, Charles Davis, all these people. That was great. When they just hit them for certain amounts of time, just little pockets to get reaction. But actually, to have the analysts, the proper draft analysts on the main panel, I think that was a big tick in the box for me. I found I learned more, and I'm. And Gus, you know me, and I'm quite happy to be in the Heath Evans side of things, where I'm freely admitting that I don't know what these players will bring. I've got an idea of what teams need, but all of the draft is a real learning curve for me. So I like listening to. I didn't watch a huge amount of the college game this year. You and Mainzy and lots of other people, Simon Clancy, who's on the BBC NFL show, Rob Staten. These are big, like yourself, big draft guys. You're able to analyse and assess young players and what they may bring to a side. I don't do that. I don't know that, and I never profess to know that. I've got an idea of what type teams might need, but I also like learning on the day. I like watching Mike Mayock say he's this, he's that. He needs to work on this to go with to be productive in the NFL, and the thinking, and also the way that a GM would think in the war rooms, and why they go a certain way. I like that explained to me. And I think it's actually, you don't have to be an NFL super guru to actually enjoy the draft. You can think, well, actually, they've gone this way. He looks an exciting prospect, and added to him, and him. This could be a winner for a certain franchise. So, I read up on as much as I can. I don't profess to know anything about a certain player. The only one I tended to really know about was Myles Garrett. And that was only because of the hype around him being number one. He was always going to be number one. He was a generational type player. So it's nice to learn about those players, and that's, I think that's what you do.
I mean, well, if we talk about the draft itself, one of the first surprises came with the second pick. The Chicago moved up, and people, it's like, oh, is it going to be Solomon Thomas? Have they come up to get, one of the Malik Hooker or someone? And I don't know if you know this, but invited to the official Bears draft party at Soldier Field was Mike Glennon. Then, when the second overall pick was read out, Glennon was there and amongst all the Bears fans, hearing that basically they've just said, we've just taken your replacement, basically, and you haven't even thrown a pass for us yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was amazing. And didn't he say something like he felt cheated on by the Chicago Bears? I mean, this is what I don't understand. And again, other people would be in a far better position to tell me. But Ryan Pace obviously wants to make a mark as the Chicago GM. He wants to have his franchise quarterback of the future, as does every GM. I think if you asked all of them, they want the franchise to be successful under people that they select, under a team that they build, and especially coming out of the draft. Now, people were saying that Mitch Trubisky would actually have fallen to the Chicago Bears had they have stayed where they are, but what they gave up to actually go ahead of San Francisco. Now, even if San Francisco had wanted to select Mitch Trubisky, and all of the noise coming out, of course they would say this, but all the noise coming out is actually that they were quite happy not doing. There were other quarterbacks that were pretty reasonable, as we saw Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, that were still taken in the first round. If they wanted to, they could have had a pretty steady quarterback had they selected, one of those two other guys. So have the Chicago Bears reached? Yeah, I thought they reached hugely, considering they've given Mike Glennon this contract, $18 million guaranteed, and they've also taken the quarterback of the future. Now, you and I both know they have got glaring needs in about 7 or 8 different positions. Quarterback wasn't one of them. If Mike Glennon fails to do what you need him to do in the first year, then fine, go ahead. But what you're doing is actually, Mike Glennon has played one full season as Tampa Bay's quarterback. He's a veteran. He's been in the league 4 or 5 years. Is he Joe Montana? No, he's not at all. But there is an argument to say it is worth giving the dude a shot. It really is. He's got all the attributes. He's got a big arm. He's tall. He can see down the field. He can throw it down the field. I know. I've been watched him many a time. And I didn't think he was the answer in Tampa Bay when they took Jameis Winston. I think that was a no-brainer for Tampa Bay in that particular scenario. Having said that, to select and to spend the money he has when there are glaring fixtures that need sorting out in the Chicago, I would say both up front and defensively as well, as many teams do, I was staggered. But as a viewer, it just blew the whole thing open, and it was brilliant. When the wows from Mike Mayock when they took and selected Mitch Trubisky, and also from the crowd, the reaction, no one could believe it. That set the whole of the first night up. It really did. Changed the thinking in so many other teams' minds. Started the run on quarterbacks, and we saw Houston trade up. We saw Kansas City trade up. And this is the other thing, and that we love. As much as you can know about a player, and I can go all, Kevin Costner or Brad Pitt and Moneyball on this, you don't know how they're going to be. You can think you do, but no one is an absolute surefire dead cert. How they respond to being drafted so high, why they play, or how they play with the millions of dollars that are attached to their names, and how they react to being in the bubble of the NFL, you just don't know. Hence why I think, someone like Bill Belichick, he's not picking until 80-odd in the draft, because he wants to go with tried and tested people that he knows can do the job in the situation given, whether offense or defense, by Josh McDaniels and Matt Patricia. He wants to know that there's a guy who is used to the league and he's happy to give up draft picks for him. Now, that's one way of doing it. It seems to be quite a successful way, let's be honest. But the fact that Chicago picked where they did made the whole of the next 3 hours just brilliant.
I mean, it's as you say, it started a little mini run on quarterbacks, which was good news for a lot of teams, especially the Eagles and Washington, and also to an extent to the Bucs, because, O.J. Howard was going to be, he was a top 10 pick by all accounts, to fall where he did. In our mock that me and Mainsy did the other week, we had them taking David Njoku, so that they were given them a tight end, but that was on the understanding that Howard would be long gone by then. So just that one pick changed the entire draft, and it benefited. Again, we'll assume these players are going to live up to the potential. It benefited so many teams further down.
Absolutely right. They thought there was going to be, eventually there was a rush on pass rushers as well. A very strong defensive draft, wasn't it, Dutts? And the Bucs could have addressed a number of different areas. I didn't think with the coming out of Cameron Braid last year, I didn't think tight end was absolutely the biggest need for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. As a fan, I would have liked to have seen another linebacker or a running back or help in the defensive secondary. Now, I think they were bigger needs for Tampa Bay, but when a player like O.J. Howard, who, when listening to the experts, say that this is an absolute dead cert, can't miss type of a player, you've got to take the best player on the board. And I love that my club, for once, apart from picking number one, of course, but they're taking the best player in the draft at that particular time. And that's what they've done with O.J. Howard. And so I look at the Tampa Bay offense, or at least the passing offense, and what Jameis Winston, as long as he doesn't keep overthrowing people, he's got Cameron Brate, he's got O.J. Howard. So not only has he got two great pass-catching tight ends, but O.J. Howard, as I understand, was a serious blocker as well for the Alabama running game. Brate is a similar type. So now what they can do is use big packages with Deshaun Jackson on one side, with Mike Evans on the other side, and then what they've got is these big, huge protections, but also the opportunity to break out of blocking and actually have a very productive pass-catching tight end. I think he opens a world of opportunities for the Buccaneers passing game. They've got downfield threats. They've got big receivers. I think they're going to be tough in the passing game. Would I have liked to have seen another running back taken? Yeah, I would. I know they got Jeremy McNichols from Boise State. And who is to say that you find a lot of value in running backs in the lower rounds, don't you? And I know that quite a few, thanks to Ezekiel Elliott, probably last year, going at 4 for the Dallas Cowboys and being as productive as he was. I think a lot of teams have seen that. We saw that in the draft this year. Leonard Fournette going from Jacksonville Jaguars. Joe Mixon went relatively early. That's another story. But going on running backs that have been taken, and I don't think everyone's got as good a running offensive line than the Dallas Cowboys, and so Ezekiel Elliott went into a very, very good situation. But I'm going at a slight tangent. Yeah, I would have. They did eventually get a linebacker in the Bucs. They did get a running back, and they did get a safety. So I think they had a pretty good draft overall, and I think that numerous teams. I think the Philly pass rusher that you got, Derek Barnett, again, by all accounts, he's the second best pass rusher in the draft, and you've got him at 14. So I think, the overall, Dutts, I'm sorry, I'm going on it. I think a lot of sides, actually, a lot of teams, really had good drafts because nearly all of them were addressing areas of concern. Now, there are some teams that you look at San Francisco and Cleveland, and they have so many holes in both offense and defense, it's difficult to know where to start. I thought they both had excellent drafts. I don't think there's any slight on either general manager from the Browns or the 49ers, just for the fact that they addressed one side of the ball in the main. The Cleveland Browns picked up the best pass rusher. They picked up, Jabril Peppers, I think, as well. Didn't they? With the number 25 pick, they got David Njoku, who you say, top tight end from Miami, and they got a potential quarterback in Deshaun Kaiser from Notre Dame in the second round. They waited. They were patient. They had, 6 picks in the top 65 overall. So, of course, they're making use of that draft stock that they had. And I think they've only improved their side. They can only improve their side because they were god-awful. So that, I think they've had a great draft. I think the 49ers, John Lynch, I think he had a very, very good draft as well. Two of the best players, according to what the experts are saying, having to start somewhere, getting Solomon Thomas, then Reuben Foster, assuming that injuries and stuff with his shoulders, don't shorten his career, whatever. But you can only go on what people are saying. And Solomon Thomas, Reuben Foster, already you've made the 49ers a more strong and tough defense. So good on them all.
I mean, I think it's similar to what you say. I mean, the Bears gave up a lot to move up one spot for a player that, we're not entirely certain is going to be the answer. Whereas the Browns seem to have gone through they've gone the other way instead of, they basically said, okay, we've got a team, now let's find a quarterback, rather than, one of these bad teams saying, let's put our quarterback in behind a terrible offensive line with no running game, terrible defence, and see how we go. And if he doesn't do well, we'll get rid of him in 2 years.
You could have the world's greatest quarterback, but if he's on his backside for sort of 70% of the time, after getting knocked down because no one can protect him, if he's down by 30 points, trying to because the defense can't stop the opposition, then there is absolutely no point. Sort your defense out. Stop people scoring on you. You never know. Special teams. If you have decent special teams, decent kicker, you can squeeze by some games by the smallest of margins if you can manage a game. We've seen, it may be fantastically unfair to Alex Smith, but we've seen Kansas City in the playoffs, last 3 years in a row, been very, very competitive with arguably the best game manager as quarterback in the league. He's not going to rip off 450-yard games. He's not going to do that. He's going to just work and just maneuver the ball down the field, have a really, really good defense. And that's what eventually, that's what Peyton Manning turned into. Even in that Super Bowl run of a couple of years ago. There's an argument made that the Broncos won the Super Bowl despite Peyton Manning. All he was doing was game managing and let the defense sort it out. So I like as you say, what the Browns have done is, and the 49ers as well, to a certain extent, sort your defense out, try and stop. And it might be a 2-year thing or a 3-year thing. But I think the pieces are starting to be, they've got a really good core of the Cleveland Browns now. I don't think it'll happen next year, but after another draft and maybe another draft, then things, they might have a group of talent there with some, steady free agent pickups that really could change the way that things have been going in Cleveland.
Especially when you consider that, they're getting younger, as it were, they're getting more talented at a time that, and I'm not saying that they're ultimately just going to come in and take over, Ben Roethlisberger hasn't got long left. So the Steelers can't... I know some, the Packers and the Colts looked into their next quarterback almost straight away, but we shouldn't just assume that the Steelers are just going to... When Roethlisberger goes, the boy Dobbs or whoever they have is just going to come in and take up. So they have some holes long-term, the Steelers, that, they're a very good offense, but they're still not... They're not the Steelers' defense that have been the last 15 years. So if you can have a talented young squad... Just bide your time until Roethlisberger finally talks himself off his horse. You could say that division all of a sudden becomes a lot more interesting, really.
It certainly does. I look at let's assume, Doug, that everyone turns out to be the player that they expected to be coming out of college and would make the impact that everybody expected them to make. Okay, let's just say. Let's say there's no busts whatsoever, and all of the experts have nailed every single player right. Well, let's have a look at this. Who can we be excited? I can be excited about watching games in the NFC South. Now, you look at that Tampa Bay offense. You mentioned O.J. Howard and the passing attack. If Doug Martin goes back, they've still got Jacquizz Rodgers, who did well in his stead. And they've got the young lad from Boise State now. You don't know how it's going to play out. He might do well. But the offensive line of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is pretty reasonable as well. It's not the worst, it's not the greatest. But you've got what could be a very high-powered offense. NFC South. Atlanta, now, were they good on offense last year? Let me just think. Hang on a sec. Yeah, pretty reasonable. Okay? You've got the Carolina Panthers, who, have got one of the most multifaceted quarterbacks, despite his headwear and his wardrobe, and his all-about-me type of mentality. But you've got a star in Cam Newton. Now, you've added to him someone that you can dump it off to probably, depends how many times a game do you want Christian McCaffrey to touch the ball. You can give him 15 runs, you can chuck it to him out the backfield, the guy's making plays. You've got, obviously, Kelvin Benjamin, who I've heard may need to stay off the pies, but still. You've got also the New Orleans Saints, who maybe have got an aging Adrian Peterson, but you've got Drew Brees, a veteran guy who knows how to put points on people. That, to me, is an exciting offense in those divisional games. They're bursting with points there, and that I think is fantastic for the fans of the NFC South, of which I am one. Some strange ones. You pick up Latavius Murray if you're Minnesota, and then you select Dalvin Cook with the 41st overall pick. Minnesota had absolutely no offensive line last year. They were awful, absolutely awful. My first person would not have been a running back. It wouldn't. It would have been having to look for the Forrest Lamps or the Garrett Bowles. And I know we'd gone by that point, but you see my point. Does address what needs addressing. Don't try and think a star will get you out. Look at Andrew Luck. This is the best quarterback, probably. Technically, he's got absolutely everything. He is one of the elite quarterbacks in the league. Why is he not winning games? Because they just don't protect him. Now, I'm pleased that Indianapolis went defense. They needed to help them out on defense. But goodness me, the guy, keep him upright, for goodness sake. And so, some of the selections have been a little odd. But I think in the main, that I really believe that a lot of teams had very, very good drafts. But we will only know how good they are until they stick a jersey on, stick the cleats on, and go run out in front of a crowd in the NFL. Because, as we know, the difference between college level and NFL level is chalk and cheese. And you don't know how they're going to respond when they hit the professional level. And just one more thing, actually, Gus. I thought Los Angeles had a really good draft as well. Now, there's a franchise. Granted, there may be watched by about 15 people in Carson City next year. But I like the pickup of Mike Williams as a big wide receiver target. And also, they've selected two great big lumping guards in Forrest Lamp, Dan Feeney as well. They want to keep Phillip Rivers, their prize asset, knowing they want to keep him upright. So they've gone and selected two, great big bigs to try and make sure that he stays healthy. That, to me, is clever drafting. That's just my opinion, but I think I think they had a good draft, the Los Angeles Chargers.
I do agree. I mean, I think the Chargers have got. You look at their offense, and it's similar to an extent to like the Bucs. It's like, well, where's the weak spot here? They've got at least 4 good receivers. They've got a good running back who came back from a poor first season. They've got a Hall of Fame tight end. They've got Hunter Henry, who led the NFL in touchdown catches for a tight end last year. And it's like, keep Rivers on his feet, try and make it that he doesn't have to score 31 points every game to win. And, that's a wide open division, because the Broncos, you could say they've gone from Super Bowl champions to potentially the 4th best team in their own division in 2 years.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And that's the thing with, you give a quarterback like Phillip Rivers, and I have no issues with Phillip Rivers, but, his stats don't lie. If you give these guys an extra, even half second, if you give them an extra half second, they can make all the difference. An extra half second is another 5 meters to get separation, or 5 yards for a receiver to get separation, and they will find them. They're that good. And especially when, as you said, they've got the receiving core of the Los Angeles Chargers, then keep the dude upright. That is the, if you've got a young quarterback, or a quarterback that is just managing, or isn't the star you think of, teams like the New York Jets, maybe like Houston at the moment, sort your defense out. Make sure that they're not going to be scoring 27, 28 points a game, because they will not be able, that they will not be able to score that kind of, in those kind of regions. So I like the way that some of them have done it. There is more than one way to skin a cat, as we know. But I just think, do you know what I think? I just think, I watch this draft and I look at the people talking, I look at the stories, and it only just gets me even more excited. It does. I want to see these guys play. I want to see what Myles Garrett has got. I want to see, how O.J. Howard plays, with all the negative news, and quite rightly so. Can Joe Mixon be the guy in Cincinnati? Should he be the guy morally? These players with off-field issues and stuff, it's still a story. I'd like to see how that plays out, how he's responded to by the Cincinnati fans. There's lots of little storylines. Oh, by the way, I think, don't say this too loudly, I think the Dolphins had a pretty good draft as well, which disappoints me usually. But there you go. But all of these storylines, all of the last 3 days of the draft that we have watched, and we've soaked in, and I will learn about these players a little bit more, reading articles and looking on the internet and the like. But it just makes me even more hungry for September.
Absolutely.
And I hope, and I pray that, I remember when Dante Fowler came on the scene for Jacksonville, and I couldn't wait to see this guy rush the passer. I couldn't wait. And then he did, an MCL or an ACL in the pre-season. We didn't get to see him for a year. It was that, and even so last year, you can tell there was still, remnants of that injury still that were, hopefully we get to see him properly in year 3. But all of these players, I just look forward to seeing what they can do. Couple of final notes from me, Dutch, because I know I'm wrapping on, but a couple of things. First off, if you are having a child in America, okay, in the next, I don't know, from now until, the next decade or so, and you think that they might get drafted by a certain team, please give them a correct first name. You can't tell me that Takaris is a name. It's not a name.
No, there were some belters in the names.
Tre'Davious White. Where'd Tre'Davious come from? What is that? Taco. Are we starting naming people after foods now? Burrito Johnson and Enchilada Smith getting drafted next year. So please, even I may be an old grumpy stick in the mud, but they aren't names. And no one can convince me that they are names. They're not names. Takaris, have you ever heard anything like it? Secondly, if you are drafted and you're coming out from the green room, and you may have seen a tweet from me on this, if you are drafted and are coming out of the green room, please do not bring a prop with you. Do not bring, as much as I'm sure Takaris loved his grandmother, and I think it's a brilliant story, and I'm chuffed a bit for the lad for getting drafted. Don't bring it out. Don't drop an F-bomb on live television to sort of try and justify how you've got drafted and why. It just sullies all that's good that's happened in your life. Please don't do that. And Garrett, don't bring your baby on stage, for goodness sake. And I know you've got a great story. Just go out, get your hat, shake the commissioner's hand, have your interview with Prime Time, and then get off and get to work. You've not done anything yet, and I know here speaks an old, wily, grumpy sportsman, former sportsman, but you haven't done anything yet. You've done it in college, you've not done anything in the pros, so just shake the commissioner's hand, get your jersey, get your playbook, go to work.
I mean, you do have to think. You do have to think how much of a prat would Takaris have looked if he hadn't got drafted, having to hike that big photo, back to the, back onto the L train or back to his hotel.
You imagine he would just have like a briefcase, one of those massive satchel briefcases that you got just carried out. I mean, goodness me, do me a favour. And do you know what? In all seriousness, that he might be a great story, and I'm very, very pleased for him. But that has a massive red flag for me. It really does. You know, Atlanta will say, "Oh, I love his energy and I love his enthusiasm, and he's the kind of guy that we want." I reckon behind the scenes they've taken him to one side and just said, "Pipe down, you. You've not done anything yet. Do not be doing that because you're representing the Atlanta Falcons." And I would if I was the owner, but hey ho. I'm maybe a little bit. Well, I'm just miserable and grumpy. That's what I am.
It's why we speak to you, Daggers. Well, it's been great chatting to you, Charles. Obviously, a busy summer coming up for yourself with the cricket. Do you know what your assignments will be as yet?
Yeah. It's been quite a lengthy delay after. Coming back from the Caribbean, I did the 3 one-days in Antigua and Barbados, which was hellish. It was tough work. It was awful having to go to the West Indies and commentate on cricket out there.
Of course.
No sympathy for that one. So yeah, I've got one of the South Africa one-day internationals coming up, a friendly against Northamptonshire, and then South Africa one-days, and then the Champions Trophy starts in June, and it is absolutely chocker in June. I'll be going from Edgbaston to the Oval to the Swalek Stadium, covering all of the Champions Trophy, including the final. Then there's 3 T20s against South Africa, a test match I'm doing at Trent Bridge against South Africa. There's Women's World Cup, there's T20 Blast, there's more one-day internationals. It is a very, very busy summer, but I can't wait, mate. Absolutely can't wait. And I'm busting to get going. And then as soon as that's all finished, can you imagine this? The NFL season will start whilst the cricket season is still on. The last game of cricket internationally is on the 29th, get this, the 29th of September at the Ageas Bowl. So I think the NFL season will be about 3 or 4 weeks old by that. So we might be all wrapped up in Hampshire watching the last game of cricket. I know the West Indies players will, but can't wait for it to start, mate, and just get really stuck into the summer.
Daggers, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thanks very much.
Hey, great to speak to you, Doc. Take care of yourself.
That was the brilliant Charles Dagnall there, talking us through a stream of consciousness about the NFL draft.
Absolutely, and he's got a busy summer ahead of him, you know, with all the cricket, as I say, and ultimately the NFL season will have started, and the international cricket summer will still be going on.
I mean, last year was it Bangladesh? Were we in Bangladesh last winter? He was doing TMS in Bangladesh, then straight on to NFL from Bangladesh via a studio in Salford or London, I'd guess. Crazy workload, but love Charles. I think he's brilliant on TMS and he has excellent knowledge on the NFL, and always glad to have him on.
Absolutely.
So Dutton, that was our draft takeaways. You know, back to more nonsense next week, I guess. Any final thoughts?
Few guests. I am in, trying to sound, big and important. I'm in early stages of negotiations with, trying to come on. One of them does have a book out. It came out yesterday. I've already started reading it. I'm not going to say any more, but he has indicated that he would like to come on to talk about it. So that's what's known in the industry as a tease. Fantastic. Well, this has been Wax and Lyrical, and these top guys are out.